franktalks.com.
This program does not represent the views of this station and may be considered offensive to some listeners. This program may contain mature subject matter, including frank discussions of controversial topics. It is intended for mature, open-minded audiences. Discretion is highly advised. This program is entirely independently produced by and is copyrighted by Frank. It is broadcast here under license.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. Today in studio we have a gentleman who will go by the name of WebMaster Tom. WebMaster Tom was known in the Montreal media at one time as Montreal's most successful pimp. He's been working 22 years as Montreal's most successful escort agency owner, and he has now turned into an internet advertiser to the ever-expanding internet escort market. Tom helped pioneer many facets of how agencies and independents operate today. Having Montreal's first escort agency website on the internet, it's claimed he's directly responsible for providing a world internet portal to Montreal's escort agency. Today we're going to learn about the insights firsthand into all aspects of Montreal's escort business. Welcome to studio, WebMaster Tom.
Well, welcome, Frank. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's start off with some of the basic questions. Where you were born, where you grew up, and how you first got into the escort business.
I was born here in Quebec in the mid-50s to hardworking immigrant parents. We were your typical low to middle class 4-member unit, having one older brother. Spent 12 years in Toronto from the ages of 10 to 22, where I met my wife there driving part-time taxi and studying college during the day. My wife was an exotic dancer at the time. We had a child very early into our marriage and 2 more later on after relocating back to Montreal in '82. I continued my business studies and worked part-time in the Montreal strip clubs where she danced. Shortly afterwards, she answered a classified ad looking for escorts. Within 2 months, I opened my own agency, which operated very successfully for the next 20 years or so. All that being said, in 2001, I changed from being an escort agency owner to an advertiser web designer, turning my existing website into an advertising site offering internet exposure to our escort industry.
I guess one of the questions that I would have for you, given that you were in the business for over 20 years running an escort service, why did you change into the internet business of advertising?
There comes a time in this business, your time is always limited. Don't ever think that you're in this business forever. Your time does come, and unfortunately, after 20 years, my time came where the government basically said, "You've been around too long. Time to move on." And to make a long story short, that's what I did, and I used my expertise from being an owner for so many years and turned it into an advertiser with that expertise.
Now, I'd really like to focus in on the fact that you opened up your own agency after your wife applied to become an escort. And I guess the question I would have for you is, your wife was an exotic dancer. She became an escort in your agency. Were you ever jealous? Were you ever threatened by that?
That is one question a lot of boyfriends over the time have asked me, and even the working girls, is how do they get their boyfriends, their mates, to accept their occupation. Basically, of all the escorts I've met, there hasn't been too many boyfriends who have actually accepted what they were doing. As far as me accepting what my wife was doing, it was a general need for existence financially or welfare, one or the other, and I decided that I might have had a tougher skin than most people, and I accepted it. I didn't like it, but I had to accept it. I thought of the financial advantages toward the family resultingly of what she was doing. but you never really do accept it. Well, actually, you do accept it, but you don't have to necessarily like it.
That's a very fair answer. I guess one thing that surprises me about you is that, you know, Montreal media really focused in on calling you a pimp. You ran the escort business for so long, and I look at you here in studio, and you do not look like a very typical pimp. You know, you don't have the hat, you don't have the cane, you don't have the big furry coat and all the chains and the dollar signs and all that. You really look like a, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but you look like a normal guy. You look like somebody that would live next door to whoever, and I'd really like to know your thoughts on that stereotype.
Most of the so-called pimps in Montreal are not your stereotypical looks that you would that Hollywood would make it out to be. We're basically normal people. Our neighbors don't know what we do. We don't stand out in a crowd. We don't dress up for the occasion. We don't drive fancy cars. We try to fit in with society as best we can. In my case, for example, one of my neighbors was a government official, not having a clue as to what I was doing, but he was there claiming I was his perfect neighbor. So we don't stand out from society as a pimp, so forth.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual agencies. Now, I know you don't do that anymore, but when you were doing that, what was a typical day working for an agency like?
Typical day, you're actually 7 days a week, pretty well 24 hours a day if you want any success in this business. It's not an easy business. There was no such thing as holidays. No such thing as holidays. Didn't even know when they were coming up. We would answer the telephones until 3, 4, 5 in the morning, wake up, pick them up back up at 3, 4 again afternoon, continue answering, and this was a routine for 7 days a week, 365 days a year for several years. It's far from being an easy business. If you don't put an effort into it, you're not going to succeed.
One of the stereotypes of someone who was in your position is that, you know, you lead a very party style life, sleeping with all the escorts who you would either represent or would work for your agency. And how do you address that?
Another major misconception: to be a successful agency owner, if you start sleeping with your staff will not stay with you. They will not respect you. They don't want to work for a boss that insists that you sleep with them. It's a big no-no as far as I'm concerned. Of my 20 or so years as an owner, I believe I have only slept with one working escort. Definitely, if you want to keep your employees, your escorts working with you, do not sleep with them.
Now, on that note, let's go into some of the people that you've met in the escort business. And I'd really like to attack some more of these stereotypes here. So I guess the next question would be, who was, or what age was the oldest escort you've ever encountered?
The oldest escort I've personally had working for me was 55 years old. I have encountered escorts as old as mid-60s, even actually operating agencies at that age, but there's no specific barrier as to when you stop escorting. There's a need for all sorts of age ranges. People have different needs. Some people prefer the younger age, some people the older age, so there's no specific time that you're expected to stop.
And at the age of 55, they were making a full-time living on this? This is what they did to pay the rent?
Yes. Basically, that was their number one goal. Usually the older girls have more of a professional outlook and a helping nature to them, which results in clients after a while realizing that some of their emotional needs are better met by the more mature escort as opposed to somebody being in their early 20s.
Something you had mentioned to me before we went on air, and that is a lot of the escorts really, Montreal has by far the most beautiful escorts in North America, even better than LA apparently. But there are escorts out there who fill a particular niche group who are very heavy. And to your knowledge, what was the weight of the heaviest escort who was making a very good living off this?
One thing that surprised me, especially when I got into the advertising realm of things, personally as an agency owner, I kept the staff to the more stereotyped description as far as thin, young. But when I got into the advertising, one thing that really amazed me was escorts would advertise with me that were 300 pounds plus, and they actually would be getting more work than somebody at 120 pounds, much prettier looking. That is one aspect that surprised me the most. So there's a market for every type of escort, every type of bodybuilder out there.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and we'll be back with Webmaster Tom right after this.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by From Loser to Seducer by Frank B. Kermit. Ladies, is there a man in your life that got dumped for being clingy, needy, or was told he was a loser, but you still think he's a nice guy and want to help him? He could be a relative or even a friend, and you know he needs the help. Do you want to be the one to give him the gift that will change his life forever? How about the gift of a great biography? Buy him the book, From Loser to Seducer by Frank B. Kermit. It is the story of a nice guy who triumphs over his inner demons to find his own hidden power. Help the nice guy in your life discover his inner seducer to find his soulmate. Buy this book now at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the book I'm a Man, That's My Job, The Philosophy of a Seducer. What is inner game? There's a lot of contradictory information out there, and one size does not fit all. Your inner game is as unique and personal as your signature or your fingerprints. This book provides you with the means to create your own seduction persona. This is a workbook, which means we will work together, and by the end, you will have developed your own personal inner game. By this, learn what it means to be a man and what the role of the modern man in today's society is that will attract him to the woman he wants. Learn about how men and women think differently and how to take the lead in a relationship. This book is for you at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Adult Male Virgin Seminar and Telephone Consultations. Guys, if the only breast you ever touched was in a bucket of chicken, you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. If the only thing you've licked recently has been your fingers to turn the pages of a book, you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. If the only female body part you are familiar with wears a cape, can fly, or has superpowers, you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. If you think the G-Spot is the name of a new club, you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. If the words missionary conjures up images of guys in long robes, you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. If the only sensation your fingers have had are pressing the buttons on your remote control, then you need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. Do you know what it means when a woman asks you up to her place for coffee? If you think that she is thirsty for caffeine, then you definitely need the Adult Male Virgin Seminar. Only available at franktalks.com. Frank helps adult boys become men.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. We're in studio today with Webmaster Tom, who was dubbed in the Montreal media as Montreal's most successful pimp, and who today runs website advertising for escorts. Welcome back to studio, Tom.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about your day-to-day routine doing your current job, not the job you were doing when you were running the escort agencies for 20 plus years, but your day-to-day job now, running the website advertising for escorts.
My general day starts off with getting up, making my coffee, going down to my basement office, opening up the computers and seeing what's happening, what advertisers have emailed me, what other people want me to do as far as web design. Service providers email me with some of their problems, but to sum it all up, my everyday thing is maintaining websites, talking to advertisers, the independents, the agency owners, keeping my site well maintained, montrealescorts.com, and a recent project of mine is moderating a local escort board called merc.ca, which stands for Montreal Escort Review Community. Besides all that, my time is spent helping the escort industry make informed decisions, providing emotional support, counsel on how to cope to the ladies, not to get taken advantage of, how not to get taken advantage of, how to make the most out of this lifestyle, and how to get out of it. Generally spending 16 hours a day in front of my computer and talking to industry service providers. I almost feel like I'm a prisoner in my own basement, but as long as if I can help somebody make a right informed decision, that makes it all worthwhile.
Something that was very interesting that you mentioned there was the fact that you encourage or you advise people on how to get out of this business. And why would you do that? I mean, that seems counterproductive to what it is you do.
It might be counterproductive as far as for my revenue base, but many people have asked me where I stand in this business. Basically, my loyalties stand for the service provider, not for the clients, not for the owners, but service providers. That's where my heart actually lies, and if there's anything I can do for them to help them in their present predicament, that's what I try to do. I have to note that I don't advise people on how to circumvent the law or how to make an agency work better or even how to break into the business. I never spam for advertisers. Everybody comes to me. Essentially, the biggest pleasure I get out of this business is when I can look at an independent advertiser who has just visited my office as a referral from another web designer or even from Stella. And I can say to her that whatever happens to her, that she can always call me up with whatever help she needs or whatever predicament she finds herself in. Just call me up. I'll help her out whichever way she can. And then she puts a big genuine smile on her face, gives me a big hug, and walks out knowing that she met somebody who is not out to exploit her. That is pretty well the biggest pleasure I derive from the business.
When encouraging somebody to get out of the business, what do you tell them? What's something that, why would you encourage them to get out of the business?
Nothing good comes out of the business. The business sucks you in to the point where after a while you can't function in the mainstream. The money is good, your hours are good, and you get addicted. Not on just on the drug of the freedom of what you're doing. Not a good thing. No matter what, years down the road, it's not going to help with your CV or anything else.
That brings us to another topic here, which is something we normally cover on the show: the sacrifices that people make in the lifestyles that they choose and the obstacles they have to overcome when it comes to working in the escort industry. From the perspective of someone who ran his own escort agency for over 20 years, and you're still involved as an advertiser for websites, what are some of the sacrifices and obstacles that you would encounter?
One of the big obstacles I've encountered is I had to overcome. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on that.
During the course of the break, you were telling me about leading a double life.
Exactly. The biggest obstacle is you have to live a double life. In everyday affairs with the banks, neighbors, schools, etc., you have to pretend you're somebody else, always ready to lie about some fictional business you have. There's a stigma attached to this whole prostitution thing. You have to lie to everyday people about your occupation, going through life, having to live a lie, and what you do. Always wondering if that knock at the doors from the authorities. Major obstacle. Another major obstacle is understanding, and as a owner, advertiser, is understanding and learning to work with the people in this world, which has basically abandoned society's normal values and expectations. There is no social etiquette. Things you would expect in normal working atmosphere and everyday living just don't exist here. Just about everybody you meet is lying to you. The general lack of respect shown toward each other. An example, your employee girlfriend of yours just disappeared, left the business without even saying goodbye. That hurts. The empty feeling you get when knowing everybody you meet or have met will never be more than just an acquaintance. You don't make true friends. Your friends are no more than from one day to the next. What I did is I learned not to judge people like regular society does, to look through the outer shell of people, to take people as they are, not to judge and make somebody, not to judge, and making somebody happy in whatever way you can for an hour a day or longer is rewarding enough. We all have these problems. I learned also hypocrisy is very prevalent in our society. The people that make our lies, apply them, and generally scoff at us are our best customers. And when something comes down, they hide. In general, our society accepts the trade. Morally, Quebecers are more open than the rest of the world. But when the crap hits the fan, everybody clams up and crawls into their corners. It's a blatant double standard, which is doing no more than confusing us all. Our laws are very ambiguous and prosecuted very selectively.
Something you had also mentioned to me prior to going on air was the fact that you had joined a golf course, and everybody in the golf club knew what your profession was, which was running the escort agency at the time, and they accepted you there.
Yes, they accepted me there. Actually, after several years at the golf course, they voted me in as their captain, their representative. Our membership was made up of police officers, lawyers, the whole spectrum of professional businessmen. But as long as I did my job as the captain of the club, there was no problem. But as soon as it hits the media, then all of a sudden they back off. It's almost like taboo, and that is one thing you have a hard time accepting. You do your bénévole, your activities. The interpretation in English for that is bénévole is your volunteer activities, but it really gets thrown in the background when all of a sudden you're labeled as a pimp or having anything to do with the adult entertainment. So the hypocrisy is very prevalent.
Something else that you had mentioned off air was that there's that danger of violence for you personally, which when you were faced in the media, you were actually your life was in danger a couple of times.
Anytime I was one of those agencies agency owners who did not spend their money, who actually saved their money, and you got to be careful with the people that you deal with. The girls find out that you have money, you're not spending it, you're trying to make something for yourself. What you eventually end up becoming is a mark. I had an experience one day on Valentine's Day. The doorbell goes. I look through the people. I see somebody holding flowers. I open up the door. It's 3 people with guns in to rob me. and not only rob me, but keep my girlfriend hostage and take me out to the banks to empty my bank accounts. Fortunately, at one of the banks there, the police were able to intervene and put a stop to all this, but it certainly woke me up to the elements that you're dealing with in the business. Keep yourself safe is all I can say.
There's one more question that I have to ask under the section of our obstacles and sacrifices, and that is one of the more unpleasant experiences of the escort industry. Understandably, it's a taboo industry. You're always facing a lot of violence, and in order to be fair, I have to ask you this question. What is the most unpleasant experience you have ever had in running an escort agency?
Personally, your unpleasant experiences boil down to is how desperate of an agency owner you are. You're going to have more unpleasant experiences the more, depending on the type of customers you take. But personally, I've been very lucky as far as violence toward any of the staff over the last 20 years. I was not a desperate agency owner. I screened the customers well, and if there was any problem, again, a common misconception is when you have a problem, you don't have a bouncer, you don't have a driver, you don't have a tough guy who goes and straightens all this out. What you do is you call the police, you call the hotel security. The police will be the first one to tell you that. They want you to call them to handle any such problem you have. And literally, they get calls like that almost on a nightly basis. Just don't take the matter into your own hands.
Has anyone ever died that you know of that were working for your agency?
Not for my agency, but I do know of an owner who I'm pretty close with on an advertising basis, where she went in, checked in, said everything was fine, and the hour was finished. She wasn't heard from. Agency called, no answer, and finally the driver went to the door, looked through the windows, and she was lying there on the ground dead after being choked to death. That affected a lot of us in the industry, knowing that anything can happen from one second to the next.
And those were the risks, obstacles, and sacrifices that need to be made for the working in the escort agency.
To the extreme, yes.
To the extreme. You're listening to Frank Talks, Pleasures and Lifestyles, and we'll be back right after this.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. What would your life be like if you knew exactly what to say and do with women? This book is for the guy that simply wants to learn how to handle women's tests by addressing her emotional needs. By this, you create the type of attraction that will make her see you as the one she was destined to be with. This book will teach you how to get the woman you want and how to keep her. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test is the Rosetta Stone for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks and how to respond. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Guys, does your bachelor pad look as frightening as an Elvis convention? Then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. Do you own a twin bed and still love your Star Wars sheets? Then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. Is the only source of artificial light in your bachelor pad the bare, dusty bulb hanging from the ceiling? Then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. Do your friends walk into your apartment and think you have been robbed? Then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. Do you think that minimalist means barren as the Gobi Desert? Then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. If your bathroom is home to a colony of anything, then you need the Pimping Your Pad seminar. The Pimping Your Pad seminar and telephone consultations, only available at franktalks.com.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by the Calibrated Storytelling Seminar. Have you ever felt tongue-tied when talking to a woman and did not know what to say next? This seminar provides the structure to create personalized stories that connect to a woman's emotional needs. Calibration is about putting people into the categories and then modifying your behavior. Do you want to learn how to be truthful about who you are, but in an interesting and seductive way? If you want women to like you for the real you, then this seminar is for you. The Calibrated Storytelling Seminars and telephone consultations, only available at franktalks.com.
You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be, with WebMaster Tom here in studio with us talking about the Montreal Escort Agency. Welcome back to studio, WebMaster Tom.
Well, happy to be here.
All right, let's talk about going back in time. Tom, this is a question I ask the majority of my guests, so I'm going to pose it to you now. If you could go back in time over 20 years when you first got into the Montreal escort business, what advice would you give yourself about getting into the escort business?
Right away, the one advice I would give myself is I should have stayed right out of it. I got into the business. Within months, I had quit my business studies at McGill and dealt full-time in this business, and biggest mistake I made. It's a dead end. It's generally a dead end industry. That was my biggest mistake. If you actually come out of the industry with something in your bank account or another business per se, chances are your successes will be taken away by our government. They had actually sent a message to the workers: if you succeed in this business, then they'll get into your pocketbooks and take away your assets. Essentially, the message is no one succeeds from this lifestyle, which is really counterproductive to our society because it just puts the worker back into the business, into that vicious cycle again. Best advice I can give is if you find yourself in the business, use the money to educate yourself and get out as fast as possible. If you're educated and wish this supposed easy life because of the ease of your own hours and big bucks, then think again. Your next client could leave you mentally ill affected, and there's always that chance of law enforcement knocking at your door. To summarize, the biggest thing that shocked me was people being so naive as to think that they are acting within our laws. The longer you're in this business, the better your chances of getting arrested. Plain and simple.
So how long would you say, if somebody is in this business or thinking about getting into it, how long would you say that they should be in the business, assuming they end up going ahead with it?
If somebody gets into this business, give yourself a time limit of 1 year. After 1 year, you start burning out. You start getting totally affected. You have too many too many skeletons in your closet. It is much harder to recover. You get much more addicted to everything that the business comes with. Give it a year and get out. After that, it's just going to be harder.
Next question, Tom. A question that I ask a lot of my guests. What are some of your future aspirations?
As far as my aspirations are concerned, I made a very wise decision in 2001 where I opened up my site, my business interest to web advertising and design. I plan on hiring employees to take some of the slack off. I'm actually got more work than I can handle, and the internet is ever increasing in size and opportunity, and I plan to take advantage of that. That is my aspirations. As legal as they come, my agency owner days are over, that's for sure.
And you don't ever think about getting back into that business?
No, because first of all, I'm not young anymore. I'm not in my early 20s. I'm in my late 40s. I don't have the patience for all the nonsense that comes with the business, the scheduling, the dealing with the girls, the hours. It's just for the young guy. You got to have a lot of energy. The competition is much more stiffer out there now than it ever was been, and no, I'm not into starting all over again.
Tom, unfortunately, we were running out of time, and there was just no way that we could have covered everything that we wanted to ask. I still got so many questions for you, and we would definitely invite you back to do a second show.
Well, I would love to come back and do a second show, even a third show if you wish. It's, again, my pleasure to be here, and anything I can do for the industry to enlighten people so they can make proper choices, that's what makes me tick.
Thank you very much for coming into the studio. You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. It's time to say goodbye, so the first thing I'm going to say to our guest, WebMaster Tom, thank you very much for coming into studio, and if you would please give us that website of yours for people to visit.
My website is montrealescorts.com, plural form. Again, montrealescorts.com. It's been around for several years, flagship of my business. And just recently we opened up a new website called MERC, MERC.ca, which stands for Montreal Escort Review Community. Great place to get an insight as to what the business is about.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for the interview. Thanks also go to my right-hand man, Zoltan King, who was working the board and keeping us sounding good and sounding continuous. Good night, everybody, and be well.
Frank Talks is sponsored in part by Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test, a man's guide to the emotional needs of women. Ladies, do you want the man in your life to understand you on your level? Do you want your man to be able to listen to and address all of your emotional needs? Show him how much you really want your relationship to be the best it can be. Everything Out of Her Mouth is a Test makes a perfect gift. The book, written by a man, for men, is endorsed by every woman that reads it. This book is a guide for men to understand exactly what a woman means when she speaks. Is that worth changing your life forever? Buy this book at franktalks.com now.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank, he's got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's. He knows what you're going through, Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com, franktalks.com.
What do you do when you feel like a fool? When your heart has been broken again? Pick up the phone or get onto Skype and talk on a private session. Yeah, get a little help from Frank Talks. Whoa, whoa, get by with a little help from Frank Talks. You gotta try a little help from Frank Talks. What do you do when your love goes away? Try coaching one-on-one. How do I sign up to turn things around? Just sign up at franktalks.com. Yeah, get by with help from Frank Talks. I get by with little help from Frank Talks. Time to try a little help from Frank Talks. rate going around. Yes, we're certain, just read the reviews. Frank knows his stuff, and Frank's several goods. Good love can soon come to you.